NASCAR is officially back. We are points racing again. The Daytona 500 is behind us, and we are going to talk about it on today's episode of the Pit Stop by WR. And welcome back, everybody, to another episode. And like I said, we're going to be recapping the Daytona 500 today, talk all about the different storylines and some of the things people are unhappy about following that race. And we're also going to talk about the race we have coming up tonight on WRN. Of course, this is Monday night, so it is TNR Grand National Series sponsored by Shoe Lawn Service action. It is the Team Banana Daytona Split sponsored by Tabletop Trio. We're going to be at Daytona, so we're going to talk all about that and more. But first off, as always, we're going to start with the NASCAR action and Daytona 500. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. picks up his first win since the 2014 season, which Stenhouse, a driver most people either expect to be up front winning the races on the speedways, or he's wrecking out trying. And that's kind of been the story of Ricky Stenhouse's career, except a lot more of the wrecking out than the finishing races. I looked up before we recorded this episode, I think it was around like 14% of his races he's wrecked out of in his career, and that's very, very high. And of course, you go way back to when he was in the Xfinity series, and he almost lost his Xfinity ride with Roush Racing because he kept wrecking the cars, and then he kind of got his act together, and he won 2 championships in the Xfinity series. It was 2012 and 2011, I'm pretty sure, Xfinity series champion. Yeah, I was right about that. So good for me, I can remember things. But then he moved into the Cup Series and didn't have the success I think people would have expected him to. He ran at Roush for a really long time, and of course he was at Roush at a time where that team was kind of starting to fall apart anyways, but he just didn't have the career there. This is going to be his first win since 2017. Like we said, that was the season he won 2 races, one at Daytona and one at Talladega, I'm pretty sure, if I remember right. But theoretically, this would lock Ricky Stenhouse Jr. into the playoffs in most seasons, but I don't think we're at that point in NASCAR, because if you look back to last season, we were in a position where we almost had to make drivers who had won races not be in the playoffs because so many different drivers won races, and that's the product of this next-gen car. So in the second season with the next-gen, we really don't know what to expect, and I think that's one of the interesting things, but it's a feel-good story. Put the long-term stuff aside for a minute. Just JTG Doherty Racing winning the Daytona 500 is a very... It's a good story, and I've been a fan of that team for a really long time. Back when it was AJ Allmendinger, that's really when I started rooting for JTG Doherty, and Allmendinger would win the road course race at Watkins Glen quite a few years ago, and that team saw a little bit of success with him, but over the last couple of years, they've started to decline. They went from being a 2-car team back to a 1-car team, and I think a lot of people were starting to question at this point how long they would keep Ricky Stenhouse, because the success hasn't been there for Stenhouse at JTG. I think his best points finish, and this one I'm not sure about, but I'm pretty sure I read it was maybe 22nd is the best he's done in points since he went to JTG Doherty in 2020. So I think winning the Daytona 500 is going to be very good for his career at this point. It's his 3rd career win, but he's really only able to win on the super speedways. And really, JTG at this point, they're a team that they're really going to be winning on super speedways. And to see them win anywhere else, you might have expected them to be running up on short tracks. A couple of years ago, like when they had AJ Allmendinger, he was really good at Martinsville, and that team, I think, finished 2nd at Martinsville once or twice, and you could expect them in contention at some of those short tracks. Same thing when they had Chris Buescher. He was really good on the short tracks, and so JTG cars would get up to the front, but we don't see JTG Doherty being able to go up and compete for wins that much anymore. So the Daytona 500 was it's a big race for any team, but for a team like that who's really kind of been struggling over the last couple of years, maybe this will be something to give them a little boost of confidence and help them to rejuvenate themselves. You never know, but I think it's probably going to do a lot to solidify Ricky Stenhouse Jr. to them. I know they're very confident in Ricky Stenhouse Jr., but there's a lot of people outside that organization and a lot of the fans too not having a lot of faith, I guess, in Ricky Stenhouse Jr. because it's been not the career a lot of people would expect. And we talked about the inconsistencies with wrecking cars, and he's only finished, they said this stat on the broadcast yesterday on Fox, that he's only finished on the lead lap in just over 50% of his races. Not necessarily the best stat either. Some of the other big storylines was RFK, I thought, going and running up at the front. Brad Keselowski and Chris Buescher ran bumper to bumper up at the front of the pack for quite a bit through the middle, and late in the race, those RFK cars showed really good speed, and that's something they've really been wanting to work on. I think, too, they said on the broadcast that it was the first time that Roush Racing, or now RFK, had led the Daytona 500 in like 9 years or something like that, and I didn't expect that because even after, and we talked about, too, Ricky Stenhouse was at Roush Fenway for a while, now RFK Racing. They always, to me, even after Roush had their decline in the 2010s, where they weren't going up and contending for races that often anymore, they always still seemed on the plate tracks to be able to find their way up to the front. And that's something I guess I had been like, oh, they're still going up and competing races, and Brad Kay, the most successful driver on plate tracks currently in the sport, I guess not in the Daytona 500. So it was good for that organization to go up and lead laps, and they've got two very good drivers, and that's another team I think this next-gen car has really benefited. We saw Chris Buescher win Bristol last year, and that's something that you can say, well, Brad Keselowski comes in as a new owner and helps bring some new experience and whatnot to the team, and now they're a little bit better, and now they can build cars. But I think a lot of that, too, probably comes back to the next-gen car and how they more standardized where the parts come from, and so everyone's on a more equal playing field. And for RFK, I think that's what's going to help them out. And there's a lot of teams like that. You could say Front Row Motorsports, we really haven't seen it, but they've been a little more competitive than they always have been. I think for newer teams like Trackhouse, a big part of maybe why they've been so successful is because it's more of an equal playing field, and so these smaller or newer teams are able to compete with the powerhouses who've been in the sport like Kendrick or Joe Gibbs, maybe not as consistently, but they're able to have better shots and be a little bit closer every week, and now we see Trackhouse as repeatedly a contender. Speaking of newer teams, too, I guess this doesn't... They're not really a newer team, but Legacy Motorsports, you all know, they are what they are. That team over the last couple of years changed quite a bit, but Jimmie Johnson, I can't do this show without mentioning Jimmie Johnson and how good a run he had for not having been in NASCAR for 2 years. I know he got up to the front a little bit. I don't think he ever led and wasn't in contention at the end, ended up wrecking out, but my man Jimmy J still got up there, and he had a really good, I thought, run for not having run a plate race or run the next-gen car. And that's another one of those teams I talked about, teams who are probably going to be very benefited by the next-gen car. I think Legacy Motorsports Club, or Legacy Motor Club, my bad, is a team that's gonna really benefit from this car because we've seen them, they haven't done much noteworthy over really a long time, over even the last decade or two in the sport. They've won a race here, there. Eric Almirola won one at Daytona, and then they went a really long time, and we had Eric Jones win last season the Southern 500. So this is an organization, they've brought in Noah Gragson, who's a really good driver, and he was entertaining. If you didn't see him on the grid walk, too, he was really entertaining, too. Had Wendy's on the car. So with Jimmie Johnson coming in, I look at 2023 as being a year I expect to see a lot of growth from Legacy Motor Club. That's just my opinion. You can tweet us at WRN Broadcasting. What are your takeaways from this year's Daytona 500? Before we keep talking Daytona 500, and next up too, just to get it out there, we're going to talk about some of the controversy on social media over the commercials in the Daytona 500. So if you want to hear about that, stay tuned. But first, I want to take a moment to talk about Upside, the free app that lets you earn cash back on gas, dining, and grocery purchases. I've used Upside for a while, and I absolutely love how easy and convenient it is to use. For Pit Stop listeners, if you download the app and enter promo code Mitchell9789, you'll get an extra 15 cents per gallon off your first gas purchase. That's so easy to do. Just download the app. We have a link in the description of this episode wherever you're listening, and enter promo code Mitchell9789. That's MITCHELL 9789, and you'll get an extra 15 cents per gallon off what you would already be saving with your first purchase of gas on Upside. So make sure to go check them out. I really do highly recommend it. I've used it myself, and it's a very nice app. And this is an unsponsored plug, but this is more just to improve your all's lives. I found today, and I had heard that this existed, we're getting closer to Easter season, and so Pepsi has this Peeps Pepsi. It's Peeps flavored Pepsi. I found it today while I was at the store, and I'm sitting here drinking it while I'm recording this episode. It's pretty good, so if you see it, Mitchell does highly recommend checking out Peeps Pepsi. But that's all the off-topic I'll do for now. We'll see if I get off on any other tangents later. But next up, I want to talk about something I've seen on social media, and that is people complaining about the amount of commercials that were in the Daytona 500 this year. A lot of people are unhappy with, one, the amount of commercials that Fox showed, but two, people are pointing specifically to a wreck that happened under commercial where they didn't go back live to recap the wreck and then go back to commercial later. And I think I have a different take on this than a lot of people do on social media, and that's probably because I work in media and just a background on me, I guess, because this is important. I work here at WRN. Well, I run WRN. I kind of started it for my own enjoyment, but we're a media company. Outside of this, I also work in radio, so I have different media experience and broadcast experience. And so I want to get that out there before I give you my opinion on this issue. And if you all want to see this breakdown too that I'm going to be referencing, it's on jski.com. It's the commercial breakdown for the 2023 Daytona 500. So people are upset by the amount of time Fox spent going into commercial, but more particularly that they didn't go out of commercial during a wreck. First, we'll just go over the numbers here so we know what we're talking about. So the total length of the live broadcast was 249 minutes. It was also the longest Daytona 500 in history. That's not really relevant to this topic, but just a fun thing to mention too. 200 of those 249 minutes were in the race live broadcast. There were 49 minutes of traditional commercials where it's just full screen commercial and 14 minutes in side-by-side commercials. So there were only 49 of the 249 minutes spent where you couldn't see the race in some form or fashion. And that wreck happened in one of those side-by-side commercials that was 14 minutes of the broadcast. So people are upset because it did feel, and I'll admit this too, it did feel like they went to commercial more frequently than they normally would, I think. And they did spend, I'm trying to do some quick mental math. It's a little over 60, about 63 minutes out of 249 were in commercial in some way. For me, and being more inside the industry, I'm used to being on the other side as much as I am the fan watching. I understand why they're doing this, and I don't see anything wrong with it. And there's a couple perspectives I'm just going to share with you, and you all can rip me to shreds and say, no, Mitchell, they shouldn't be doing this. They should be showing all the coverage they possibly can. And I understand that too. I'm a fan before I am the broadcaster. Like, I make the podcast, but I sit at home for NASCAR broadcast like all of you, and I watch as a fan. But for me, having worked in broadcast media in the forms I have, the lifeblood of the industry is sponsorships and advertising. We could not do any of this without sponsorship and advertising. And even here on this podcast, I don't really make anything off this podcast. I more just do this for fun, but we do have Upside that's a sponsor here. We promote every time. I highly encourage you, if you want to support the podcast and save money yourself, you use Upside, and that helps us out as much as it helps Upside out. And that's kind of how the industry works, is advertisers pay money and you show their commercial. That's how it works. And that is how money is made. There's really not many other ways that like Fox Sports makes their money, and they spend a lot of money too to produce the Daytona 500. It's a big race. Sponsors will pay more money to get commercials in the Daytona 500. And so, yeah, I guess you would love to have less commercials ideally, but they've got to make their money somehow. And I was listening to MRN earlier today too, right before actually I started working on this podcast, and they had another interesting perspective. I'm not going to agree or disagree with it. I don't know actually who it was talking on MRN. It was one of their hosts, but I'll just share that too. And again, I don't agree or disagree with this. I'm just saying, on MRN, they were talking about how NASCAR would like you to get to the track. To watch the race on TV, you're not paying any more than you normally would for any other TV. You're paying your TV bill. The Daytona 500 is on your local station, so you're not paying the big cable bills for the big national channels or anything like that. So you basically, you get it on your TV for nothing to you other than the TV bill you would be paying anyways. Versus if you go buy a ticket and go to the track, then you don't get commercials. That's what the MRN host was saying. I thought it was interesting because he was basically implying NASCAR wants you to go to the track. So if you don't want commercials, go to the track type perspective. And I don't agree or disagree with that. I'm just sharing that opinion, and I probably don't say it as eloquently as it was said, but it was an interesting opinion because we see NASCAR they have the NASCAR fan rewards program they've started this season. They are trying to drive fans back to the track. The Daytona 500 was a sellout, but there are a lot of races that don't sell out. And there was a period in time where almost every race was sold out for NASCAR. And they're definitely wanting to try and get back to that. Obviously, the more people that go to the track, the better it is for them. And so I don't think they're overloading commercials for that reason. That's where I think that's a little bit flawed. I don't think they're overloading commercials to get you to go to the track. They don't want you saying, oh, I'm tired of this, I'm going to go see the race. Well, obviously, they would like you to do that, but I think more the reaction is, oh, I'm tired of this, I'm going to watch something else because this is going to commercial every 10 minutes or 5 minutes at times. That's just my opinion, though. Like I said, I don't discredit them at all. I completely understand because, like I said, those commercials pay for everybody that helps work on that broadcast. And there's a lot of people behind the scenes, a lot of people who put in a lot of time to produce that broadcast that we watch every single week. And it's not like, I guess they could do, if they wanted to go commercial free, you could offer, pay-per-view NASCAR. I'm definitely not saying they should do that. I don't think they ever should, and I don't think they will. But just if you want commercial-free, uninterrupted stuff, they would have to go to a pay-per-view model to get that. Or if they have to decrease commercials and only run one every 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever, pay-per-view might be the way they have to go with that. So that's not something I think we, the fans, want. And so while maybe you're unhappy with how many commercials Fox aired, and it's true, they did air quite a bit of commercial, but it's just the nature of the beast. It's what you have to do in the broadcast media industry to stay alive, and it's a tough industry to make a lot of money at. So I don't discredit them at all. They're just doing what they have to do to get us the race. I just wanted to talk about that a little bit too, because that's been another big topic of discussion this week. The Pit Stop is a production of the World Racing Network. WRN is your home for the latest news about the world of racing, racing games, and iRacing series broadcast weekly. Check us out at WRNBroadcasting.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WRN Broadcasting, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for the latest broadcasts and episodes of The Pit Stop. Now we're going to talk about TNR. We have TNR tonight. If you're listening to this Monday, the day it comes out, we have TNR action tonight on WRN. If you listen to this after Monday, we had it on Monday night, and I highly encourage you to go check out the race. We'll be talking about it on whatever our next episode comes out. I don't know when that'll be. Like I said, I'm trying to get on a consistent schedule, and with Speed Weeks, it kind of changed things up, because I didn't want to do an episode before the duels, which would be when I normally came out with an episode. But I also couldn't do one in between the duels and the Daytona 500. So the resolution was just to do one immediately after the Daytona 500, and that's what we've done this week. But again, working on getting a consistent schedule laid down. I'm hoping soon you'll see episodes every Thursday at noon. Again, it's just kind of, racing is here and there, and my life is a bit crazy at the moment, so we're just working on doing what we can do. But we got to talk about TNR. Like I said, tonight is the Team Banana Daytona Split presented by Tabletop Trio. It is a doubleheader at Daytona, so it's going to be races 7 and 8, I'm pretty sure. I should have that in front of me when I go to record, but I don't. Two completely separate points-paying races on one night. I believe the format is going to be two 40-lap races at Daytona, and I believe that in the second race, the starting grid is going to be inverted from the finishing order of race number 1. So, like, the winner starts last, second place second to last, and then vice versa. The last place car rolls off from the pole, second to last, starts second, and that sort of thing, which I think is going to make for a very entertaining race. Daytona, though, already entertaining as is. You throw in the doubleheader event. Last season, TNR did a doubleheader at Lucas Oil Raceway in Indianapolis. That was great. I can't even imagine what it's going to be like at Daytona. So definitely, if you're listening to this on Monday, come watch us tonight, 8:05 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be a great show. My normal broadcast partner, Garrett Gleason, he's going to be racing this weekend. I'm going to be joined by Will Radcliffe up in the booth. And for those very, very long-time listeners of WRN, you might remember Will. We actually did the first broadcast on WRN together. It was the TNR Dirt Big Block series. It was me and Will did the first two broadcasts on WRN. So he's coming back to the booth tonight. Garrett Gleason going to be our in-race reporter, going to be racing the WRN car, so make sure to check out TNR tonight. Last week in Indianapolis, too, we have to talk about that. We said this on the broadcast, probably to the point of annoying the viewers with how many times me and Garrett talked about it, but us as broadcasters, we go into a road course race not expecting a very entertaining broadcast. And last Monday night, we were at the Indianapolis Road Course. And so me and Garrett both, and TNR had come to WRN beforehand too, and had been like, hey, we understand if you don't want to do 40 laps at the Indianapolis Road Course, because these races always get super strung out, and you have to come up with random things to talk about. I think one time, the most entertaining road course broadcast we had on WRN, I think it was at Watkins Glen. It was the Beer Street Journal Grand National Series with the NSRA last season. And I think me and Patrick Morrison was in the booth with me from Simtrax Broadcasting. And we ended up talking about, like, random, like, economic stuff. And you come up with random things to talk about, because 2 hours where there's not a ton going on track, which is, unfortunately, it's just how iRacing road courses typically go from the broadcast standpoint. Getting back to TNR Monday at the Indy Road Course, that was not the case. We had the best road course I have ever watched. That has been one of my favorite races to call 40 laps long at the Indy Road Course, and it came down to the last couple of corners, and you could have had a last corner pass. Philip Scott passed Johnny Eckert with 3 corners left to go in that race. They battled almost the whole race, definitely the 2 best cars, and you had the wild child, John Cannizzaro, got up and mixed it with him a little bit early on, but then he kind of fell off. But then Philip Scott, he's a driver any road course we go to, and unfortunately from my perspective, because I enjoy the road courses a little bit, and I always enjoy driving them, so if I was a driver, I'd be really upset about it. That was the only road course we get this season, was Indy Road. But Philip Scott, always on the road courses, he's got to be one of your favorites. Johnny Eckert has come into the series, won at Dover, second at the Indy Road Course. Of course, Daytona tonight. You never know what you're going to get, and you've got 2 different points races, so today's kind of a wild card. But from what we've seen from him on the normal tracks, I don't want to do the broadcaster's jinx, but definitely championship contending material. I will say, if he can continue the runs we're seeing right now, could definitely be one of those drivers we talk about late in the season when we're talking about who's got the shot to win the championship. That is all that I have in store to talk about on today's episode of the Pit Stop. I want to thank you all for listening, and remember, if you enjoy this series, you want to hear more of it, please hit that follow button on wherever you are listening to the podcast. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you get the advantage of also being subscribed to our live broadcast as well. So it's a win-win for everything. Make sure to go check us out on social medias at WRN Broadcasting or WRNBroadcasting.com. Look forward to talking to you all in our next episode of The Pit Stop. We'll be recapping Auto Club Speedway for NASCAR. It'll be the final NASCAR race on the 2-mile configuration of Auto Club Speedway. It'll be a very somber and sad race because I don't think a lot of people want to see that configuration of the track go, but we'll talk all about that on our next episode of The Pit Stop, so make sure to tune in then. I'm Mitchell Adams, and we will see you next time. The Pit Stop by the World Racing Network is a production of the World Racing Network. The host is Mitchell Adams. Our theme song is Aviation by Track Tribe and is used with permission from Track Tribe. This episode was written, edited, and mixed by Mitchell Adams. Thank you for listening.